Hello and welcome to Psych 101, Chapter 3, Biology and Behavior. This is one of those very in-depth chapters that could go on and on and on. And because I'm kind of just talking to myself, it's not going to be that much fun. But hopefully with me narrating it, you will not be bored to tears. If you are a biology major within psychology, you're really interested in this stuff, or you're interested in neuroscience, then this is the chapter for you. And you can take an entire semester on biological psychology or neuropsychology. But for the purpose of Gen Psych, I am really going to try my hardest to just kind of limit and snapshot things. All right, so let's get boogieing. All right, so as you know, every chapter starts with a vignette that carries you through the chapter. This one starts with Brandon Burns. If you're interested, by all means, go ahead and read it in the textbook, but I am going to skip over this. All right, so now here we start with all the fun stuff. All right, so the complex communication network, that is your nervous system. This is your big giant network that really delivers all of these messages throughout your body, and it uses your brain to communicate all of these things. Your brain is such an intricate, amazing system that we don't physically see, but it's because of our brain is the reason that we have all of our genetics, our environmental issues, our behaviors, everything that kind of our walking, our talking, our thinking, our feeling, whatever we do all starts with the old noggin here. And there are billions of cells in your body that communicates with each other. And then there's about 100 trillion links that kind of just communicate and bring it all together. So, like I said before, if you are interested in this field, you can take neuroscience, neuropsychology, because in that you're going to study the brain and nervous system. You're not going to be, doing therapy, talking to people. You are going to be helping those people to understand what is going on when it comes to injury, like car accidents or any kind of, dysfunctions that are going on with the brain biologically. So biological psychology is one of the subfields of psychology if you're interested in going into that field. And all that's going to focus on is your brain and all of the other biological systems that influence our outward behaviors. These are, I'm not going to cover this, but they do get their credit because of them. We now understand the brain, which kind of morphed into brain scans that we use today. So now when we look at contemporary biology, we can now look at what's going on inside the brain. Especially here, we can see what it looks like for someone who has a normal brain structure versus somebody that may have schizophrenia, because their two brain systems look very different. And how we do that are through multiple scans. So some of these or all of these you might have heard of. Understand what the scans are. So what I want you to know, I will let you know by saying, hey, what I want you to know is this. So do know how the brain is studied. And one is through structure, one is through function, and your structural scans are your CAT scans and your MRI, and then your functional scans are your EEGs, your PET scans, and your fMRIs. And we'll go further into that as we get into other chapters. But just know that your structural scans are the CAT and the MRI, and then your functional scans are your EEGs, your PET scans, and your fMRIs. Doctors use all of these for various reasons. Some are very expensive. They're all expensive, but some are more expensive than others, and that's because of the detail that goes into it. All right, so these are all of the structures of the neurons that I'm just going to very much skim over the top. That's why I love pictures, because it shows you this is the neuron and everything that is involved with the neuron and the processes that go within the neuron. All right, you're holding things together. Your glial cells are like glue, and as you can see from the picture, it's kind of the glue that holds the system together. And in looking at the vignette that carries you through, that's why it has the question, describe the function, or the statement I should say, describe the function of the glial cells after Brandon's injury. So his vignette kind of explains kind of what's going on within the brain system. All right, so you're going to see all the processes that are going on inside the neuron. It's surrounded and filled by positive and negative charged ions. The difference in sum of the positive and negative charges determines the charge overall. The two processes direct ion flow into and out of the cell. This is a bunch of like wah, 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 wah. So unless we were like having a discussion on this, it's kind of just boring to listen to all of this stuff. But, you know, there's all of this positive and negative things going on within your brain that helps within the system of how we carry on our behaviors and our actions. So I'm just kind of skip over this type of stuff, because in a basic, big, giant nutshell, this is how our brain communicates with each other so that we can outwardly communicate. These are again, this just moves down the chain of neurons with your resting potential and then your action potential. And then this beautiful picture, that's why I love pictures, because they can kind of explain without words of what is going on with these potentials. All right, so what happens after this sudden jump in voltage? The resting potential is reestablished in order to bring back to natural state. So what it's explaining is that, you know, everything that goes up must come down. It's like you get up in the morning and you're all awake, you're ready to start your day, you go, go, go. And that's kind of basically how I'm explaining it, is we go, go, go. And then by the time it gets to night, then our brain says, you know, we need to reestablish this system of order to be able to reset and kind of start the next day. All right, so looking down to move down the axon, the action potential occurring in one axon causes the change in the next. And it's just kind of like a wave system that just, you know how waves break on the ocean? The wave starts, just, yeah, think of it like a wave. You see out in the ocean, the wave is starting, and it's just kind of like woo, woo, and then kind of crashes. That's how you explain that. All right, so you've got your excitatory signals and then your inhibitory. Think about like your excitatory, it's just like boom, 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 becoming all over the place. It gets excited, messages are firing. And then the inhibitory ones, they inhibit neuron from releasing a signal through the axon. So it kind of just stops and says, hey, should we be doing this? And then you've got your all or none. It's either going to fire or it's not. So the neuron conveys stimulus strength by firing more often and then delivering its message to more neurons. Your myelin sheath, I'll cover that a little bit. It's important. It's important to know if you're studying things like MS, because it's a very important neuron that is responsible for that disease. All right, and if you're interested in studying head injury, this talks a little bit about, you know, the difference between men and women and brain injuries like playing soccer. Most people believe that football is more dangerous, but more studies are finding that playing soccer is very damaging because of the trauma to the brain when the soccer ball hits the person's head. All right, so now more communication between neurons. You've got your neurotransmitters, receptor sites, and your reuptake. Neurotransmitters I will cover more. You might be looking at this saying, ugh, what are those? You actually do know what at least some neurotransmitters are. You just may not know that they are neurotransmitters. So here I am to tell you what they are. All right, so we'll skip over this because this is the collaboration and reporting when you're in class. We would get together and you would talk about different scenarios and then kind of discuss them. And that's kind of how you learn more about this, within the chapters. All right, so we're going to jump right into those neurotransmitters by covering acetylcholine and glutamate first. I'm going to let you know now that you should know, ding, 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 these two neurotransmitters. So your acetylcholine, this has to do with all the messages that are relayed to muscles that enable your movement. So if you have too much of this neurotransmitter, you're going to have more spasms. And then if you don't have enough acetylcholine, that is linked to paralysis. So if somebody is paralyzed, then you do know that they have very limited acetylcholine. Low levels in the brain have been linked to Alzheimer's disease. So people that have very limited acetylcholine, that they are more prone or do have the disease of Alzheimer's. And then glutamate, that's an excitatory neurotransmitter that plays a very key role in your learning and memory. And if you have too much of that neurotransmitter, that is linked to strokes. And if you don't have enough glutamate in your system, that is linked to schizophrenia. And the thing with schizophrenia, there is a lot of linkage with different neurotransmitters, as you're going to see in a minute. GABA, don't worry about. I mean, it is important in your sleep and waking, but we're not going to, that's not something that's going to be tested. But I do want you to know norepinephrine, because that really plays a role in a lot of things for body and stress. In the brain, norepinephrine is involved in regulating your arousal and your sleep. And if you have too much norepinephrine, then that is linked to overarousal and hypervigilance, which is linked to schizophrenia. And then the most important one that most people know that I definitely want you to know is serotonin and dopamine. Because if you have too little serotonin in your brain, your body, that is linked to depression. And this is why that doctors will prescribe depression medication like SSRIs, because those boost your serotonin levels to help you normalize that depressive state. And then dopamine is very key in attention and learning and regulating all of your body movements. And again, irregular activity may underlie schizophrenia and depression. So not having or having those issues with dopamine are linked to schizophrenia and depression as well. I also want you to know your endorphins. Those are very natural producing opioids. So we have those, and it's a very protective factor, because when we are hit with pain, your body naturally kicks in those endorphins to help you. And that's why back in the old days when women had babies and when there weren't all of these medical doctors, your body was designed to help you with protecting itself. So now, we're lucky that we have these medications that help us with childbirth and all other types of things, but your body was designed to protect itself. So that's why, let's say if somebody, does get stabbed multiple times, they will feel obviously the first and maybe second one, but then your body kicks in those natural endorphins, and now your body just goes numb. And then with exercise, when you're like, oh, I don't want to go work out, I don't want to go jog, I don't want to run. But once you kick in and you start going, your natural endorphins kick in, and then you feel this burst of energy because those endorphins are released. Okay, so everything I just covered basically is in this nice little summary that you can read, and it'll just tell you about the neurotransmitters, what their functions are, and then a little fun fact about it. All right, your agonist, your antagonist, I'm going to skip over that, but these basically kind of cover that. So your coffee, yay, caffeine, I should say. Going to have a sip. Question is, how many of you consumed caffeine today? That could be coffee, tea, soda, whatever. Many people have very physiological effects to caffeine. It is considered an antagonist, and there are many benefits to drinking caffeine, but then there's also drawbacks. I had to do a study for my research methods class way back when getting my bachelor's degree, and I decided to do it on something I loved, which is coffee. So I did the benefits of drinking coffee, because there are actually a lot of benefits, but then there's also drawbacks. So just gotta know, both sides. Every side has a story. Every story has a side. Know both. That story that there's this story, there's that story, and then there's the truth in the middle. All right, so now we're going to do a little overview of your nervous system. You've got your central nervous system, and then you've got your peripheral nervous system. Your central nervous system is your brain and spinal cord, and then the peripheral is everything else. And we'll get more into that. All right, so I'm going to skip on that one. You've got your sensory neurons and your motor neurons and your interneurons that basically kind of, in here shows you your reflex. Everything that goes on, that every action that you do is within your brain. And so your brain may not be initially involved in something like touching a hot pan, but when you touch a hot pan, it activates those systems in your brain. And then it just moves up this, ladder, and your brain it's like almost immediate, gets this message, and then you have this reflex that says, because your brain actually does sense it and then tells you to, hey, that's not a good idea. So that's kind of what they call that knee-jerk reaction. All right, your peripheral nervous system includes all the neurons that are basically not in the central nervous system. There's two functions within that. You've got your somatic and your autonomic nervous system. Your somatic is the branch of the peripheral side, so you just want to know the difference between the two systems. All right, so that includes your sensory nerves and your motor nerves. It gathers the information from your sensory receptors, and that part of the system controls the skeletal muscles that are responsible for all of your voluntary movements. All the things that you voluntarily do. And the branch of the peripheral nervous system that controls involuntary processes within the body are your autonomic. The two divisions that help respond to and recover from stressful or crisis situations are your sympathetic and then your parasympathetic. The basic difference between those two, your sympathetic ones, consider those are the things that are moving along and boogieing, and then your parasympathetic nervous system is the one that says, okay, wait, we need to rest. We need to rest now. All right, so this just shows you, I love pictures because they really help kind of the visual learners like myself to understand what these two things are doing. So your sympathetic, you can see like with the eyes, dilates. Now think about that, dilates. That's like, woo, that's an action, more of the action type. Whereas the parasympathetic, that's kind of the restful, it constricts. Now it's going back. As you see, sympathetic increases respiration, parasympathetic decreases. You'll notice on both sides, the sympathetic is like your action side, and your parasympathetic is kind of like your, ooh, let's take a chill right now. All right, I'm gonna skip over that. We're gonna go into the endocrine system. When we look at the endocrine system, these are the things that are involved: your pineal gland, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thyroid, adrenal, pancreas, ovaries, and testes. These are all the things that you don't think about, but these things help us grow. They help us digest our food. They help us have children. All those lovely things that help us keep evolving in life. This is a story in your book that I will put a link to the video for you to watch. It's about a little girl named Christina, who's not a little girl anymore, but basically she had a seizure and they were like, okay. And then she started having multiple seizures every 3 to 5 minutes. And she was diagnosed with Rasmussen's encephalitis. And basically she had to get half of her brain removed. Usually when that happens, which is very rare, your right side governs your left side and your left side governs your right side. So what that means is if your right side is removed, you can't move your left side. And this little girl just shocked science and doctors, and it'll show you in the video. But what was I going to say? I just lost my train of thought. I'm sure it'll come back. All right, so right brain, left brain. Your cerebrum is your largest area in your brain. It has 2 distinct hemispheres. Your corpus callosum is the thick band of fibers connecting your right and your left. It allows for both of the sides to communicate together. Just think of it, it's like a relationship. Your right needs your left needs your right. Without the right, left can't work. And so that's what the corpus callosum is. Split brain operations, those are called hemispherectomies. They are very rare. Doctors use them as a very last resort, but they do happen. And then there are things called split brain operations. Those are less extreme. They are also rare, but it's just less, I don't want to say kind of less intrusive, but this is kind of what it looks like to study the split brain. So you can pause the video and look at, the information that is going in and how it's registered with somebody that is going through this type of issue. All right, so lateralization, the idea that each cerebral hemisphere processes certain types of information and excels in certain activities. Your left hemisphere, so the left side of your brain, this is where the language is excelling, and the right hemisphere is the visual. So that's why they come up with those left brain, right brain people. But while there are clear differences in the way hemispheres process information, they can also process the same type. So not everything is all one-sided. Things do kind of spill over into the other side. All right, so it's a little dark over here. This right here says handedness and language dominance. So the left hemisphere handles language processing in about 95 to 99%. So that's huge of people that are right-handed, but only about 70% in those that are left. You will need to know the difference between Broca's area and Wernicke's area. It is pronounced Wernicke because it is German. And these were 2 people that suffered with damage, so it was named after them. But Broca's area is a region of the cortex that is critical for speech production. And then Wernicke's area is the region that is pivotal for language comprehension. So Broca is for speech production, giving it out, and then Wernicke's is for comprehending that speech production. And then it just shows you in the brain where these are located. Okay, so this again is Brandon's story you can look into about what happened to him with his brain injury. All right, so the right hemisphere is more proficient in identifying mirror images and spatial relationships, mentally rotating images, recognizing faces, understanding and processing emotional information about people's faces, and evaluating hypotheses and rejecting those that lack support. And then the right hemisphere and language-related tasks, they specialize in understanding abstract and humorous use of language, somewhat better at following conversations that change topic. All right, so this this goes back into Christina's brain injury and what happened after she woke up. That was very surprising to doctors and really helped understand, elasticity and children's brains and how they, their brains are very malleable. But just understanding children and their brains and how resilient they are. All right, so again, this is the collaboration and report, getting into groups and kind of digging in deeper into understanding split brain situations. All right, so neuroplasticity, brain's ability to heal, grow new connections, and reorganize in order to adapt to the environment. Your brain scans show when Braille is learned early in life, a region of the brain that normally specializes in handling visual information becomes activated. And again, children's brains are more, I'm going to say like elastic. They have more plasticity than adult brains, so they can handle. Well, I mean, when I say that they have a more what's the word I'm looking for? Resilient healing factor than adult brains, but then again, they are very fragile too. So that's why that shaken baby syndrome, you just can't do that. So don't do it. All right, we're going to skip over the stem cells. Again, this is understanding Christina's surgery and what was going on, and understanding her brain. All right, what I do want to cover, the cortex, and what I want you to ding, ding, ding know are the lobes of the brain. You've got your frontal lobe, your parietal lobe, occipital, and temporal. So your frontal lobe, that's up here, and that's understanding all that executive decision making. It's responsible for all of your thought functions, so cognition, thinking, perception, and your impulse control. And because your body or your brain is not developed until you're about 25 years old, your frontal lobe is not fully developed, which is why, adolescents and younger people make those riskier decisions, because it's not an excuse, but it's an understanding of their brain is not fully developed. Your parietal lobe are receiving all those sensory information like touch and pressure, temperature, and spatial orientation. So, when you're touching and when you're feeling, that's your parietal lobe sensing that. Your occipital lobe is all the visual information that's coming from your brain. And then your temporal lobe is all of the auditory and language processes, and kind of like your feelings, like your anger and your happiness, all that stuff is housed in your temporal lobe, which we'll go into further. So again, I love pictures because they help kind of understand what they do and kind of where they are located and the processes. All right, so this is a really cool case study that was done. I'm sure most of you have heard of Phineas Gage. So way back when, in 1848, he was involved in a very horrible accident. And as you can see, this 3-foot rod basically went straight through his skull when he was working on the railroad. And as you see, went through his cheek, brain, and skull. And it caused significant changes in his personality, which kind of helped with the study of personality. And that's another chapter. That's one of my favorites. So now that we understand what role the lobes play in personality. So he, as you can see up here, he was accidentally in this accident where this rod went through his head. He survived. He actually got up. He was walking around. But his personality was very damaged. He was described by people as a very balanced individual. He had a really good personality and an attitude, but this all changed after. And he became very angry, started cussing a lot. I mean, I don't know. I think I might too if I had a rod that went through my head and I lost my eye. Um, but anyways, it just helped in understanding. I mean, that's not really it, but I mean, I'm sure it is, but I skip it around. But now, because of him, he was very instrumental in studying the lobes of the brain. All right, so I will skip over that one. Albert Einstein, they said that he, in their words back then, was retarded. We don't say that now. We say developmentally challenged. But when they did a autopsy of his brain, he has the most indents in his brain, all of those little dents. They say for every dent, that's like information. And they were, talking about, did he have a super brain? So when they did an autopsy of him, they found that he had all of these divots in his brain. So a postmortem comparison of 35 male brain specimens and Einstein's brain found that the region of his brain, the parietal lobe, that's responsible for visual spatial cognition and math ability, was 15% larger than those in the kind of normal, the control group. So the question they ask is, do you think Einstein had a super brain? And then further, what cautions do we need to take in interpreting this research finding? All right, we're going to skip over that. All right, so below the parietal lobes on the sides of your head are the temporal lobes. Now, the temporal lobe, that processes auditory stimuli. It recognizes visual objects, face, plays a key role in language comprehension and memory. So that is where we talk about Broca's area and Wernicke's area. All right, the occipital lobe, the visual information initially processed in the occipital lobes is in the lower back of the head. So it's kind of like in this area right here. Again, this is another collaborative report. If you're, obviously in class, this is again to further extend what you're learning through the lecture. All right, so what they ask is, now that you are almost finished reading this chapter, half. Actually, no, we are more than half. I'm sorry. You probably realize how hard your brain works 24/7, often in ways beyond your awareness. So the question they are posing is, choose an important activity that you would like to examine. So giving a presentation in class. I mean, not many people want to do that. Going on a first date. That's probably, I find in my classes, people want to talk about more. And discuss how specific structures of the limbic system, brainstem, and cerebellum are actually involved. All right, so this is a chart that summarizes everything. It summarizes the structures of the brain and then the functions and importance of it. So this is a good thing for you to kind of look over and study because those things that I said you had to know, this will kind of help you summarize that. All right, your association areas, the regions of the cortex that integrate information from all over that brain, all those cells, all those neurons, all those fibers that I discussed, that allow you to learn, that allow you to think abstractly, and that allow you to carry on all of those other very smarty pants tasks. They are located in all of your lobes. Vast majority of the brain's cortex is dedicated to the association areas. All right, so I'm going to skip over social media because we're going to talk about a lot of that in class. All right, so your limbic system, that's a collection of structures that regulates emotions, basic drives like hunger, and aids in the creation of memories. So your thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala, and your hippocampus. I love talking about the amygdala and the hippocampus. All right, so this is just a little, a little chart that I incorporated into the presentation that's in the book. These are just benefits for you. I think it's very important in today's society about taking care of your hippocampus. Your hippocampus is what's responsible for your memories. So if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates, in that movie, Drew Barrymore's character, she suffered with hippocampus damage. Your hippocampus is in your temporal lobe. So she could not form any new memories. So your hippocampus is, what am I trying to say? It is responsible for your long-term declarative memories, which is why every morning she woke up, it was like a blank slate because she could not retain new information after she went to bed, because her brain basically reset and it wiped clean, except she could remember all of her old memories. And I'm going to go over that in a minute anyways. So these are really good things, especially if Alzheimer's runs in your family, to eat walnuts, berries, cocoa, if you can, oily fish and broccoli, because they help in maintaining your brain health. All right, so these are other parts of your cortex. You've got your brain stem that's up in the left corner. That's dark. I gotta fix that. Your brain stem, that's the brain's ancient cords, old, consist of a stalk-like trio of structures. So your midbrain, hindbrain, and your forebrain. So your midbrain is the part of the brain stem involved in arousal, movement patterns, and response to sensory input. Your hindbrain is responsible for your fundamental life-sustaining processes, like within that is the pons and medulla, which is located back here. And then your forebrain, that's the biggest part of that brain, and that includes the cerebrum and the limbic system that we already went over. So these are just all parts of the cortex, and then within that, all those other things are housed in there. So your cerebellum, that is called little brain. So know that. It's the structure that's behind the brainstem, responsible for your coordination and balance. So basically, if that part of the brain is damaged, you would not be very coordinated and you wouldn't have very good balance. This, again, I love my charts. This gives you the structures and a kind of a snapshot into what they do and their importance. So I would definitely study these little charts. This just talks about controversies about men and women, the his and her brain, because there's, there are those stories, that talk about, well, men are more math prone and women are more like visual and arts, prone. So as you can see through this chart, the influences on our brain, on the brain structures. Again, we have another collaboration, and this talks about, occupation. So what occupations are commonly thought to be more suitable for women and for men? And then you would discuss, stereotypes and why those things do happen. Are they supported by scientific evidence? And you would just want to back up your claim when you're arguing, for or against certain beliefs about careers. All right, so this is the very end. Now it's where are they now? Where is Brandon now in his situation, and where is Christina now? All right, so yeah, we're gonna skip on that. And that is the end, and I was able to keep this under 40 minutes, yay! But I have a whole other chapter to cover, so that is cool that I left this under that 40 minutes. So with that said, you guys have a wonderful and productive day, and be very kind and loving to each other. And with that, I am going to say peace.